All right, I want to bring in our panel on this. We're joined by Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, Mike Lyons, veteran of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Bronze Star winner, NATO veteran and military analyst, and also our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman. All right, quick snapshot. What do you think the president was trying to accomplish last night, Mike, and do you think he was successful? And I know that's only one person, but you had somebody like Congressman Meeks who was no before the address, and now he's sitting on the fence here as undecided. What was the president trying to get done yesterday?
First and foremost, Lear, the fears of Americans that we were going to war. I think that was at the top of his list. I think, you know, this whole problem at the top of everyone's kind of wiring diagram of what the president's talking about is we're going to war. And even though Secretary Kerry says we're not going to war and the like, anytime we talk about shooting missiles into Syria. So he had to connect the national security interests. He made a big statement about the moral interest. We heard the visual and the graphics on the children. So his job really was to assuage the fears of Americans with regard to the plan. I think he did it. You saw those poll numbers. But what those poll numbers said was go slow. You know, do the pause, don't fire. And so that's what the poll looks good from the president's perspective.
He was definitely trying to sway public opinion and by extension then apply pressure to Congress, allaying the fears about a full-fledged war, certainly one component of that, but also selling the moral argument, selling the children and the multiple references to the kids at the beginning and the end, trying to increase popular support for whatever action he winds up taking. And that enables him to keep all of his avenues open, whether it's this negotiated deal, whether it's firing missiles at some point down the road, whether it's a vote in Congress, keep it all open.
You know, Dom, for me, the reluctant warrior line that the president has been, I don't even know, tagged as a negative thing, but I think it's a fair one. You heard him yesterday, and he made a point, as he's made it before. Listen, I'm the guy who wants to get out of these wars. I'm the guy who brought us back from Iraq, who's getting us out of Afghanistan. But it also struck me a little bit that he wants it both ways, that he wants everybody to know that, hey, I didn't pick this fight. I don't want to do it. I'm not putting boots on the ground here, but I still think we ought to do it. And it's not just me, it's the international world that drew the red line. I don't know, for a skeptical public, that you can kind of have it both ways and convince them it's the unqualified right thing to do. He seemed even conflicted last night.
Well, Richard, I don't know if I necessarily agree with you on that one. I've been paying close attention to what you've been saying on this issue, and most of it, as it relates to Syria, I agree with. But on this particular issue, I really think, I know we've discussed luck and so on, but I really think that Obama has handled himself well in this situation. I thought it was smart to force Congress to show their hand. Now, he may not have the votes, but it was even smart on how he was able to postpone that. He can say, and I really believe that he does not want any type of military action. And I thought he broke it down last night on the most common denominator level where everyone could understand to alleviate fear, the word that both my colleagues have used, and I really thought that he did a good job. Now, I don't see the connection of how he wants it both ways, so I turn it back on you.
Well, I guess from a practical level, this Russian plan, Mike, the devil's in the details on this. For him to make this thing work, we hear skepticism today from the White House about, let's see, you're talking about Assad and Putin, not exactly two guys that don't have agendas here. And you explained yesterday, anybody who thinks you got guys in white suits, they're going to walk through the middle of a civil war and be able to scoop the stuff up in 2 weeks and give us the thumbs up, keep dreaming. Talk about a little bit, for this thing to work, we already are seeing pushback from the Russians and certainly the Syrians de facto about deadlines, that if they don't make dates and if they don't make specific transparencies here, there'll be consequences. We're way apart here from consensus as to what this thing would actually look like, right? Even if everybody likes the idea.
Yeah, we've taken two of the most secretive countries in the world, and now they're all of a sudden going to expose their chemical weapon stocks. They're going to expose the operation to get them out of Syria. They're going to come up with the numbers themselves. Somebody's got to go to Syria and be a security force to separate the Syrian Free Army, who's the real losers in this situation. We'll come back to that later, I'm sure. But to separate them from the Syrian government and then oversee chemical weapon stocks that can only move by ground, can't move by air. We're talking hundreds of millions of metric tons of it. that's very dangerous and all the like.
Is the UN capable of doing that?
The UN, Blue Helmets, they'll order NATO. They'll bring a military unit, of course, to do it. The question is, who is it? And is it Americans? Does that mean boots on the ground? I mean, you know, are they going to be armed? All those kinds of things. We surely can't expect UN inspectors, chemical inspectors, to go into the middle of a civil war. That doesn't make any sense at all.
But it can't be Americans because that amounts to boots on the ground. I mean, right?
Well, it depends on what capacity.
Part of a UN force or part of a NATO force. Look, it's going to be difficult. Nobody said it was going to be a piece of cake to do this, but isn't it better than not doing anything? Isn't this better than no
The
advance?
problem is the president already said there's got to be consequences for what they did. Now there's got to be consequences if they don't abide by the agreement, whatever it's written up. There's enough momentum. You think something will get done, but do we look the other way if they don't really be compliant? That's a political question. But you started to say, Mike, winners and losers out of this. Who would you say? I mean, I guess Assad's got to be a winner if he can get to survive here.
Big winner. Assad's a big winner. He's going to become the legitimate leader in Damascus again. Russia becomes the legitimate client state for Syria. The big losers in this zero-sum game, unfortunate, is the Free Syrian Army. And you saw Senator McCain talk about this morning on the talk shows. You know, how are we going to arm them right now to go against the Syrian government when we're now going to have a ceasefire to go on between those? So, you know, I think the president looks at this and says, if I got to choose between the American people and the Free Syrian Army, I choose the American people. So that's where I'm glad he made that decision.
All right. When we come back, we're going to get into the question, especially on this anniversary, if and how the memory of 9/11 has impacted not just foreign policy, but specifically even the Syria policy when it comes to national both interest and agenda. That and a lot more when we come back here as we leave you with a live picture of Lower Manhattan.